Doesn't President Trump's refusal to concede discredit those efforts?
That's ridiculous. And you know it's ridiculous. And you asked it because it's ridiculous.
Hello， 各位观众朋友们，大家好，我是郝一博，欢迎收看美国大选专题，一起来看一下美国大选目前的最新发展。
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes. When the process is complete, there'll be electors selected. There's a process. The Constitution lays it out pretty clearly. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department is functional today, successful today, and successful with the president who's in office on January 20th, mid-afternoon, will also be successful. I went through a transition on the front, and I've been on the other side of this. I'm very confident that we will do all the things that are necessary to make sure that the government, the United States government, will continue to perform its national security function as we go forward.
So you believe there's widespread voter fraud, that the reports that we're getting from Pennsylvania, from Michigan, showing vote totals in massive leads or significant leads with 99% reporting are going to be overturned, and that the United States failed to conduct a fraudulent free election?
Rich, I'm the Secretary of State. I'm getting calls from all across the world. These people are watching our election. They understand that we have a legal process. They understand that this takes time, right? It took us 37 plus days in an election back in 2000. We conducted a successful transition then. I'm very confident that we will count, and we must count every legal vote. We must make sure that any vote that wasn't lawful ought not be counted. That dilutes your vote if it's done improperly. We've got to get that right. When we get it right, we'll get it right. We're in good shape.
Should foreign leaders not be calling
We're in good shape.
President-elect Biden?
It was next.
You said when the process is completed.
Mm-hmm.
So when are you?
Yeah, this is the third question. Just, ma'am, if you would. I came out here today and talked about important foreign policy issues. This is now the third question.
This is the most important thing that's happening in this country right now. I'm wondering.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead and ask your question. I'll give my answer.
What kind of guidance are you giving to American diplomats on how to characterize the results of the presidential election? And also, this department frequently sends out statements encouraging free and fair elections abroad.
Yes.
And for the losers of those elections to accept the results. Doesn't President Trump's refusal to concede discredit those efforts?
That's ridiculous. And you know it's ridiculous. And you asked it because it's ridiculous. Look, the truth, you asked the question, yes, ma'am. You asked the question, if you will permit me to answer it. You asked a question that is ridiculous. This department cares deeply to make sure that elections around the world are safe and secure and free and fair. And my officers risk their lives to ensure that that happens. They work diligently on that. We often encounter situations where it's not clear about a particular election. We work to uncover facts. We work to do discovery, to learn whether, in fact, the outcome, the decision that was made reflected the will of the people. That's our responsibility. It's what we try to do, along with partners all across the world, along with OSCE inspectors, to make sure that those elections were free and fair. We want every one of those votes to be counted in the same way that we have every expectation that every vote here in the United States will be counted too. It is totally appropriate. The United States has an election system that is laid out deeply in our Constitution, and we're going to make sure that we get that right. And we have, all of you have, and should be committed to making sure that that happens. I think every one of you wants that same outcome. You want every vote to be counted. You want to run the process. We want the law to be imposed in a way that reflects the reality of what took place. And that's what I think we're engaged in here in the United States, and is what we work on every place all across the world. Thank you all.
The media in this country do not decide who the winner of the election is. That is the role of the Electoral College. And as of today, not only has Joe Biden not been certified as the winner of any single state, but if you look at the actual facts, President Donald Trump still has a clear path to victory. This is your 2020 election update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. I was speaking with my editor earlier today, and to be frank with you, because I have to read all of these media reports every single day, I was getting a little bit frustrated because I was trying to figure out how and why the legacy media outlets are reporting the way that they are, and how they're calling this election, even though it's obviously still in the air, and how they are wholesale ignoring evidence of, let's call it voter irregularities, just to avoid the YouTube censorship. But what he told me actually calmed me down quite a bit, because he said that any reasonable person, any person who's viewing this thing objectively, who's looking at the election right now, knows that it's not decided yet. Based on the math, the election is still very much in play. He also recommended to me that I should not focus on the narratives that are being pushed by the legacy media. And so for this video, let's do this. Let's ignore what the legacy media are saying, and let's instead look at the actual numbers across this country. The most clear path to victory that President Trump still has is through Arizona, Alaska, North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Now, Alaska and North Carolina are still counting their votes, but both of them, with their combined 18 electoral votes, are looking like they're going to go to President Trump. Georgia's election is unbelievably close, with a razor-thin margin of just 12,000 votes, and a recount is underway. So if that recount yields just a 0.25% change, that could flip Georgia over to President Trump, which would be another 16 electoral votes. Now, Arizona is also coming right down to the wire. The latest batch of votes that were counted there brought President Trump to within 15,000 votes of Joe Biden's lead. That's just a 0.5% difference. And there are still approximately 70 to 80,000 votes that still need to be counted. So Arizona is still very, very much in play. And that's, by the way, not even mentioning a lawsuit that was recently filed in Arizona alleging that improper actions of poll workers invalidated the ballots of people who voted in person. Now, Pennsylvania is the state that I really want us to focus on today. The margins there are also incredibly slim, with Joe Biden just being 46,000 votes ahead of President Trump, which is something like only 0.7% of the vote. Now, yesterday, the Trump campaign filed a lawsuit in Pennsylvania, and this lawsuit alleged that their election process violated the Constitution by creating basically a two-tiered voting system, with one set of rules and standards for people that vote in person, and another standard and another totally different set of rules with a much lower standard for both verification and transparency for ballots that were mailed in. And by the way, in Pennsylvania, the number of ballots that were mailed in is giant. 2.6 out of the approximately 6.75 million votes came via mail. This is how the lawsuit spelled it out. For voters that actually came to the polls, they were required to sign voter registrations, have those signatures checked against voter rolls. They were voting in a place that was monitored by authorized poll observers, and they had their votes counted in a transparent and verifiable, open and observed manner. Now, by contrast, the lawsuit alleges that the over 2 million mail-in votes lacked all of these transparent and verifiable qualities. It says that, for one, the Pennsylvania Secretary of State refused to require adequate verification of the voter's identity, meaning that the mail-in ballot signatures were not checked against the database. Two, rather than require that all votes had to be received on the day of the election, the Secretary of State allowed ballots to be counted even if they were received up to 3 days after the election, without requiring any evidence that was actually mailed in on time, such as a postmark with a date on it. And thirdly, unlike the in-person voting that was open and transparent to both parties, the lawsuit alleges that mail-in ballots were reviewed and counted largely in secret, with no monitoring and little to no meaningful access to the Republicans. And in fact, I read a report that one poll observer was kept so far away from the ballots that he literally had to use binoculars to see what was happening. And again, with a difference of only 46,000 votes between Joe Biden and President Trump in Pennsylvania, any lawsuits like this, any audits, any recounts, or the invalidation of any ballots that weren't handled properly can swing this election in a single heartbeat. And this, let's call it voter irregularity just to avoid the YouTube censorship, is not being investigated only in Pennsylvania. Yesterday, Attorney General William Barr sent a memo to the Justice Department authorizing the prosecutors there to, quote, pursue substantial allegations of voting and vote tabulation irregularities prior to the certification of elections in your jurisdictions in certain cases. He added that such probes could only be conducted in the presence of, quote, clear and apparent, credible allegations of irregularities that, if true, could potentially impact the outcome of federal election in an individual state, end quote. Now, William Barr was called out as getting political for publishing this directive by both Democrats and the media. But the question to me is this: if you're the Justice Department, why wouldn't you pursue credible allegations of voter fraud and irregularities? In fact, in my opinion, it would be weird not to. But regardless, this is exactly why, when you look at the real numbers, when you look at the reality on the ground from state to state, there is no clear winner yet. This election is very much still up in the air. And when this type of situation occurs in America, when there are razor-thin margins, when there are credible allegations of voter irregularities and voter fraud, we have a system in place for that. That's how this country works. The media does not decide elections. When there are disputes, the courts are there to resolve them.
好的，以上就是今天的节目。大家对美国大选的想法是什么？你可以在下面留言、订阅或者赞助我们的频道。今天就到这里，我们下次再见。